Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, proudly brought to you by Ravens Recruitment, Australia's pharmacy recruitment agency, spotlights the myriad of career paths available to pharmacists. Your host, Christy Lee Patterson, and her esteemed guests will be sharing invaluable career advice that you can implement at any stage of your career journey.
Welcome to the Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, where we dive into the journeys, challenges, and triumphs of pharmacy professionals who are making their mark in our industry. I'm your host, Christy Lee Patterson, and today we're exploring the intersection of the pharmacy and digital health world with a very special guest. Mina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here, Christy.
Thank you. Now, Mina, your career journey from pharmacy to IT is quite unique, but I'd like to go back to the beginning and really understand what drew you to pharmacy initially, but then also what led to your decision to pivot into the IT and digital health space.
Thank you. So for me, I think what really drew me to pharmacy initially was actually one of my local pharmacists. So it was a local pharmacy in Burwood here in Sydney. It was an AmCal, and my parents were always speaking really highly of the local pharmacist, and I really took a liking to that. And I think sort of part of my journey was we've got a lot of pharmacists in the family as well, in here, in America, overseas. So for me, pharmacy seemed like a very logical choice. Obviously, everyone grows up thinking they want to do medicine, but then after seeing what my sister went through, I was thanking my lucky stars I never made it into medicine, because I'm very happy with where I'm at. But I think, pharmacy for me was really one of those opportunities to really be out there. You're still in health, you're still someone who is involved in your community, and you're there for people in their time of need at almost 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. sometimes, the hours that the pharmacy would open. So that was always really appealing to me, just being able to serve and to service your local community. The IT aspect really came from in the home. I think, my mum's in IT, so I grew up with that around home, since I could remember. I still remember playing, Prince of Persia on the Windows 3.1, 486 back in God knows when. So that was always showing my age a bit here, but that was always fun. And so I always grew up with that in the background, and it was really a bit of a journey to continue with, with the health sort of perspective. And health to me was always where I was going to end up. I just had an affinity to that part of the world and the workforce. And eventually I found the opportunity to use both what I knew and what I was taught and what I liked and what I loved. And, that's being health and technology. And so, finding my way into a digital health sort of related career was almost felt like I was just riding the wave and just taking the opportunities as they came. So, it was really pleased to be in the position that I'm in, very privileged to be in the position that I'm in as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember some of those games as well. So some of our listeners may not. So maybe it is showing our age a little bit. Now, with the transition to doing IT and bringing that into pharmacy, you said that you've got background from your home life and your family, but did you have to go and do any further education or study to actually help you make that switch as well?
I didn't have to, but I wanted to. I think that's really the main distinction for me. It was always, I'm always a learner. I always see myself as the student. I always want to learn, and whatever problems that I see, I'm always interested in, well, why is there a problem in the first place, and what is the actual problem? Because what sometimes we see is that, particularly from a software perspective, when someone talks to you about an issue that they're having with your software, it's always from their point of view, but they haven't really defined the problem for you. And so being involved in that conversation with them, you really start to unpack where the problem actually is, and you're able to then find a solution for it. So I think from my perspective, looking at, I suppose, so it wasn't necessarily a must do, but it was something that I've always wanted to do. For me, I'm a student at heart. I've always been a student. I like to learn, and being able to pursue further study and education in, I suppose, in purely IT sort of perspective. So I'm currently finishing a Masters of IT with University of New England. I feel like that's helped me do my job better, but it's not necessarily a requirement, depending obviously on the organization that you're working for, but it's not necessarily a requirement to be able to use your pharmacy knowledge to be able to allow a particular organization or software or service that is focused on digital health to be able to be that voice of the customer, particularly if the customer is pharmacy, but also to bring in your health knowledge as a pharmacist and health industry knowledge to help, again, bridge that gap from a digital health perspective. Where I found the education was really helpful for me is it helped me be able to speak with our technical teams so that we're talking the same language. But at the same time, it helped me understand enough to be able to communicate and, I suppose, translate to our users what it is that particular feature or functionality or integration was going to be delivered. And I think that's where pharmacists really excel, is where we sort of sit, is we sit in between the patient, the prescriber, the aged care facility, the allied health professional, and we translate the health jargon and the health speak to our patients. And I found that was a real benefit because we have those skills sort of built in us as students and as we practice, in pharmacy, irrespective of the environment that you practice in. We're able to do that. We're able to absorb the information from one particular discipline or principle and translate that to the person that we're trying to serve at the end of the day. And that's your patient or your customer, for example, if you're working from a commercial perspective.
That makes a lot of sense. And as you're talking about being that link between the pharmacy and then the tech people in your organization, I think it's almost like a translator role, really, isn't it?
Correct.
And I will be honest that one of the education degrees that you did, I might actually start that again. Now, when I was prepping for this podcast, I had a bit of a look on your LinkedIn and I saw that you had done a educational degree in health informatics and e-health. I will be honest, I did have to ask ChatGPT what that actually was. So I'm sure there's some listeners that are also in the same boat and not really understanding what that is. And so I think what you were talking about before is a good segue into this. And so, yeah, why is health informatics becoming so important in pharmacy practice from your perspective? And how can we actually use that information to drive better health outcomes, really, for our patients?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been important for a very long time. I think it's only really coming to light and becoming ever more prevalent just in the last I'd probably say in the last 10, 15 years or so, especially with the improvements in technology and the improvements in computing and computer power and information systems in general and database technologies as well. I think that's really fundamentally why it's becoming ever so prevalent. When we really sort of boil it down, like what is informatics in general, and sort of thought to look up a quick sort of definition beforehand. So I'm not making this up. There's a reference if you guys really want the reference. But it's really the way that we use technology to collect, to store, process, display, retrieve, and communicate timely data and information across whatever sort of environment that we're in. So if you sort of apply that principle to whatever system that you've used, whether it's your dispensing software, whether it's your phone or an application on your phone, those principles are really around how do we treat and manage data and information. And I think just given the world that we're in, everything's electronic and in inverted commas, electronic, this, that. Pharmacy, I think would really, particularly pharmacy students, will really benefit, I think, from a primer on what informatics and health informatics is and what information systems are. Because fundamentally, informatics is really those practices, but where it's heading is how we collect, store, process, display, etc., etc., that's all occurring information system. So if you're in a hospital, that's your EMR. If you're in a pharmacy, that's your dispensing software or whatever other clinical services software that you're using. If you're in a GP clinic, it's your prescribing software. It really is I suppose it's very important to have the understanding of what you're really trying to achieve with that particular system. And so when you look at it from a different sort of levels, you've got, your concept of informatics and how you sort of manage that data. And in the past, that may have been on paper forms and eventually it became electronic. And then it became, how do we use an information system? How do we build databases, et cetera, et cetera. Then you're looking at the next stage of understanding, well, what is the data, like a pyramid, for example. It's called the data information knowledge wisdom pyramid. So you're really looking at a hierarchy of, well, I want to go from data, which is really like a particular reading of some sort, say it's a blood pressure reading, for example. That's just a piece of data. The information is understanding that this is a blood pressure reading for so-and-so. The knowledge aspect to it is knowing whether it's really high, really low. And then when you're sort of looking at wisdom is, well, what should I really do about that? And then understanding where the value, and that's where the value of information systems comes in is, well, we need to do something about this for this patient. Here's some recommendations. So it's a way of understanding how your information system works. And then essentially all of this is wrapped up into an information system where you're really bringing all these ideas into a bit of a framework, and it really is a way to capture that data and information. It sort of does something, and that's where the calculations and sort of little bits and pieces occur, and then it spits out and generates for you that knowledge and the wisdom of the data that you've sort of put in to create more value. And that's why they cost a lot, because what you're trying to do is to create value and more value from the information that you're entering into it. Dispensing software, just because we're putting in it's quite transactional, putting in the different scripts that are coming through. But what does that mean in context of that patient history, right? It's being able to view the history, being able to understand where the opportunities are for a particular counseling point, using your system and any inbuilt clinical decision support tools that are able to highlight these opportunities for you. That's where the information system becomes really handy. And being able to understand these principles allows you to keep in mind, concepts such as data quality and making sure that we're capturing all the relevant pieces of information and relevant data about a particular patient to be able to generate the right outcomes for the algorithm that's running in the background, for example, to generate for us the insights that we want it to generate. So I think being able to keep that in mind, being able to recognize the opportunity that the understanding of information systems. So as pharmacists, we need to really understand and appreciate the value of the data that we're putting into our software, whatever that software might be, and understand where it's going and how it's going to help you in the pharmacy, but also who else has access to that information, who else had access to that data. And I think in the future, I'm really expecting to see data and pharmacy information really almost being considered as part of the valuation of the pharmacy, because it will become an asset to that particular pharmacy, having a well-formed information system where there's research. One of my lecturers in one of the subjects did his PhD on this, and that's putting a commercial quantity or commercially quantifying the value of an organization's data. That's something that we'll be seeing a lot more of in the future, given the fact that if you have an organization with a really valuable data set, there's a very good price tag to something like that, because what we're doing at the moment is we're feeding all these large language models and AI chatbots with our own company information, our own data, to generate those insights for us. So I feel like that's where pharmacy needs to really start being aware of the value of putting in that, that extra piece of information about someone, but understanding obviously the impact of something like that, but also recognizing how that's going to help the pharmacy generate commercial outcomes, because it is a health business at the end of the day, from the clinical insights that they're generating from their clinical information systems. So I think overall, understand exactly what you're doing, how you're doing it, and the the information that you're putting into your system is vital.
I think that's the biggest takeaway message there for me is, understanding the value of the data that you're putting in. I know in pharmacy, and you just almost feel like you're just asking questions or inputting data for the sake of it, and it's could be seen as time consuming and duplicating things. And I'm sure more and more software will become more interoperable and minimize that. But as a pharmacist, this is our patients' data, and by collecting this, we have this huge opportunity to make some really big health outcomes. And I almost don't think everyday pharmacist really understands that, because I think you're in the daily grind and you're just trying to get through the day.
Yeah.
By really appreciating the value of it. But then that also translates to understanding how important that data is to the individual as well, of that patient. And thinking as a pharmacist, who else has access to this information? So I'm sure we've worked in pharmacies where you've got the password on a Post-it note, password 1, that type of thing. And I think, if we appreciate that, the value that data holds, we can be a little bit more careful with that as well as to who has access to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think always read the fine print, particularly when it comes to applications that are sharing data externally from your pharmacy. Always read the fine print and understand what the implications are for your business, but also for your patients, because you are the custodian at the end of the day of your patient's data. You don't own it, but you are the custodian of that data and you look after it. And from a data governance perspective, you need to make sure that you're acting in their best interests as well. So I think that's really, really important, because someone might release calculate this report or whatever that might be, but know what's happening in the back end and in the background. And that's really where having that technical aptitude will come in handy to understand the implications of what you're about to do, but also how it's going to happen so that you're complying or you're refusing and making sure that it's not happening without you knowing about it. So that's also really important as well.
Absolutely. Really good advice. I think what we've been chatting about, I wanted to kind of delve in a little bit more about what your role is as a product manager. And I think you've kind of touched on it throughout the conversation already. But maybe if you could give us a bit of an overview as to what a product manager is and what do you actually do. I'm sure that could be a how long is a piece of string type of a question. But you worked at Quorum, which most pharmacists would know, dispense software. So what would a typical day kind of look like for you? What advice do you have for people that maybe want to dive into that type of role?
It's not for the faint-hearted, I can tell you that now. It's product management in general. And I think let's take a step back, because the pharmaceutical industry has product managers as well. Product management can differ between different industries. When you're in the pharmaceutical space, you're really looking at it more from a marketing perspective. When you're in the device space, or hardware space, you're looking at it more from a operational perspective, making sure that your products are built for future proofing. But when you're in the software space, you're really there as the conduit to the customer. You're, in this particular instance, the subject matter expert of pharmacy, because you've got a technical team and engineers that aren't pharmacists, some might be, that aren't pharmacists, that need context to why they're building what they're building. I think the motto for me when it comes to product management, I remember reading this somewhere can't remember where, on LinkedIn or something like that, but it's tell your developers the what and the why, and they'll tell you the how. That sort of alludes to the previous question that you were asking. Well, what did you need to study to be able to do what you do? You don't necessarily need to have that technical background. So I didn't have to do a Masters of IT, or I didn't have to study really anything, because what I was bringing to the team was the knowledge of pharmacy and what a typical day in a pharmacy looks like. Knowing, for example, that some pharmacists prefer to use the keyboard only as opposed to using a mouse, and making sure that they're always cognizant of that. So whenever we're developing a particular feature or a particular new functionality, well, how's the keyboard going to help? How's the pharmacist going to use the keyboard to be able to achieve something like this or to use this particular feature? So just being cognizant of little things like that, explaining to them the day-to-day workflow of a pharmacy, and being that source of truth for them. But the trick is, you're not imposing. So it's a very fine line when you're the product manager for a software where you could also be the user. So you need to create a bit of a firewall in your mind when you're having these conversations, to not allow your own personal prejudices to come through in the development. So, you know what? I don't like the button being on the left-hand side. I prefer it on the right-hand side. Well, actually, that's the answer to that question is not meant to come from me. It's meant to come from our users. So and that's where my role really comes in, is being the voice of the customer, and not necessarily just telling them what I think pharmacy wants. It's having those conversations with our pharmacists and with our users. So I have particularly for the product that I manage, Quorum Clear Dispense, I have a bit of a go-to group of users that I consult with whenever it comes to needing, a quick answer on a particular piece of functionality or a feature that we're implementing. And being able to be conduit to the technical team means that the team can develop faster. They've got their requirements set, and you're really there as a source of pharmacy knowledge, because when you're providing that part of the development work, their job becomes that much easier. Because technically, you could do anything and everything. Technology is never the barrier. At the end of the day, that's just the general rule. It's why are you doing something, and what is the market opportunity? So a lot of the times, it's sometimes forgotten. There's a commercial aspect to it as well. It's not purely just the technical aspect. There's a commercial aspect to the role, to try and understand, well, what's the market opportunity that I'm trying to capture? Is it this particular type of customer? Is it pharmacies that dispense a particular type of prescription? To use a sort of an example, that's what you've got to also put forward when you're putting forward your roadmap, when you're talking to your executives about why you're going to be pursuing a particular set of features and functionalities in your software, and then working with your sales team and your marketing team to align with the features that you're going to be delivering throughout, the next sort of 12 months. So they have the ammunition to be able to go out there and have those communications, because not everyone wants to swap over their dispense software, let's be honest. But at the end of the day, relationships is what sells. So if someone's able to have that relationship with, particularly our BDMs and our customer service managers, be able to have those conversations with pharmacies and recognize what their pain points are, and show them that we've got something that actually solves those pain points and more, then it's a very easy conversation to have. And that's really what my job is to find what those pain points are and be able to find solutions for them using technology in our application.
It sounds so interesting.
It's cool. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you're in the pharmacy and you're dispensing or entering a service or whatever you're doing. Sometimes you might get frustrated, why can't I just do this? And it seems like such a simple thing, but like you said, so much more goes into it from the back end. And until you're in this sort of space, you really have no idea. And you're like, oh, right, okay, it's not as simple as that. And the biggest thing is, I think, is that why. Why do you want to do that? Why have we been doing this? And as you've been talking, I've been reflecting a little bit on just stereotypically what it looks like in pharmacy and why we do things a certain way. And do you think that the future of pharmacy, do you think maybe pharmacists need to think a little bit more outside the square, rather than just kind of thinking about, okay, let's just digitize this process or digitize this thing, and maybe there's a completely different way of thinking that could actually streamline a bit better? And so from a pharmacist perspective, that might be communicating with the tech companies and providing that feedback if they're thinking more about why they're doing things rather than like the what, do you think that would be more useful?
Yeah, I think as pharmacists, we tend to be problem solvers. We're always looking at as to how to solve a problem because that's just how we're trained. We see a patient come in with an ailment. What are we going to give them? How are we going to help them improve? How are we going to help solve their problems? I think what this role has really taught me is to spend more time in the problem space and try and understand a little bit more, well, what is the actual issue? I think in health, it could be a little bit more easier. Someone's grazed their knee. We know we have to, clean it up and good wound management, et cetera, et cetera. But it really comes back to, well, understanding why they grazed their knee, for example. So actually spending more time in the problem space and realizing, well, hold on, they grazed their knee because they're feeling a bit dizzy and they missed a step and they fell. Well, why are they dizzy? And really starting to think about, well, the problem more and asking, the 5 levels of why, for example, and probably a very simple example to bring up, but could be something else going on. And it's really applying that same principle to what we do from a software perspective and understanding why is someone having a particular issue all the time. Well, actually, it's because they are trying to use the system this way, where it wasn't designed to be used this way. It's designed to be used a different way. And then it comes down to, well, actually, there's a training issue there. There needs to be more training that needs to be given, webinars or one-on-ones, whatever it might be, because that problem hasn't been really identified. And so someone will come to the farm, like to our team, to the support team or whatever, and really put out there, oh, your software needs to do this. Well, why do you want it to do this? What are you actually trying to achieve in your day-to-day? Because what we're really here to do is try to help you run a better business. That's really where I think there's a lot of benefit for us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a huge value of IT and digital solutions in pharmacy. And earlier you dropped the word AI, and so that's definitely a hot topic everywhere you go at the moment. I know I've definitely used it myself for many things. But do you think that's going to be the biggest transformation in the sector, or do you think that there's other things happening or other digital solutions that you think is kind of coming, or what pharmacies should be using?
Look at it like this. There's been so many different new technologies that have come out, and devices and new ways of working and et cetera, et cetera. But you still have pharmacies that are running 10-year-old PCs and monitors that aren't even running the minimum resolution that's expected these days. That's the world that we live in. And that's why it'll sort of come back to the point of we need to improve the basics and bring everyone up together and explain why running that 10-year-old PC is a bad idea. Not just for the sake of technology, but for the sake of having a secure and functional business. I think that in itself is a conversation that needs to be had first. But at the same time, it's the bell curve, right? You've got your early adopters and you've got the ones that don't adopt anything until, 95 or 99.99% of the group has adopted it, right? So I think if we keep focusing on those early adopters, we keep focusing on the change makers and the people that are going to lead the way, being able to show how these technologies can be used in everyday practice. I think we're still not there yet, particularly for health. I really don't think we're there yet for health, but it could be a matter of using these sorts of technologies to help improve the way the business is running. For example, if it's an EDM that the pharmacy wants to write to send out to its customers, I think pharmacies not using, CRMs as often as they should, for example. There's not a lot of, not yet anyway, not a lot of engagement. I think that could really be improved. And this is just from what I've seen. I mean, I'm sure there's pharmacies out there that are doing that. But I think, again, it comes down to these tools and these new technologies like AI are always going to rely on the quality of the data in your systems and in your environment for them to become super effective. So it comes back to those first principles again of, well, if we're not doing that right, then the results that come out won't be as we expect them to be. So we'll lose faith in the technology, and that's a bit of a downward spiral there. So I think one, educate yourself on what is actually coming and the applications of that in health. Two, understand where that fits in your business and in your pharmacy and in your career in general, because you don't have to be a pharmacy owner to use these details. You could be doing a HMR at home, and you're like, you know what, I can't be bothered writing it today. I'm just going to put all the details into ChatGPT and see where that goes. I'm sure someone's done that, but hope they haven't. But understanding the implications of something like that, I think that's really important. I saw an article a couple of months ago about ChatGPT where a woman, she put all the symptoms of her son after 18 months of going to various doctors, and no one could diagnose the condition. And eventually she put it into ChatGPT, and it gave her exactly what was wrong with him. Went to a doctor, asked to get it confirmed, and they're like, yep, that's correct. So yes, that is cool to see, and you're like, wow, it's going to solve all our problems. But when you really dig down deeper, understand the technology that's there and how it actually works. And all you got to do is go to YouTube, put in explain whatever the topic is to a 5-year-old. And I'm sure there's a video out there that can explain it in the most simplest terms so that you're able to also explain it to other people should they ask you as well. So I think that's really the most important thing there for me is, yes, this stuff's going to come. It's going to be integrated into our applications. We're going to use it for reporting. We're going to use it to generate insights. One of the things I'd love to be able to do is put in a prompt into my dispense software and ask how many people are on this particular medication in this particular postcode. And there you go. You've got a group of patients in your pharmacy that have this particular condition. You're able to target those patients and reach out to them and hold classes, tell them about new services that are running in the pharmacy, and really dig deeper into your data. I think that's really where the benefit I see will come. Not necessarily just scan the script and tell the AI to go dispense it. I mean, very easy these days with e-scripts. You don't really need to do much. And one of the features that we implemented was essentially just load the data directly from the e-script without really having to type anything. And if there's any data missing, make sure you fill it in as well. Again, going down to the first principles of data quality. So you could almost really dispense in your 2 clicks, for example. But it's understanding, again, what that really means for your pharmacy and then being able to utilize that data should those tools and reporting facilities sort of come through to drive those insights, build those clinical insights, and those clinical insights will eventually lead to commercial outcomes for the pharmacy business, but also the clinical outcomes and the improved health outcomes for your patients and for your pharmacists as clinicians in your business.
I had a thought and it's disappeared, but that's okay. It was really good too. That doesn't matter. Anyway, I think it's because it's a bit late, fading a little bit. Okay, got a question. Just got to tie it into what you've said. From what you were saying around that data quality, I think that's a really key aspect that I'd like the listeners to get out of this and understanding that value that the data that they're putting in, as well in the custodians of. When you mentioned that word custodian, I thought, yeah, it's actually not our data, even though we like to say it's our pharmacy data. It's our patient's data and we're the custodians of it. So I think that's a really great message to reinforce when you're looking at these type of digital solutions. And as you said, there's all these really cool things out there. But yeah, if you really do have to read that fine print. I know most people don't. You just tick the box, but it's health data. It's not just ones and zeros. It's actual. There's a person behind that data, and I think that's, as pharmacists, yeah, we're here for the people and the patients.
Correct.
The other thing I wanted to also touch on as well is that, yeah, I think sometimes we see innovation as something that's new, exciting, and things that, as you said, those early adopters and the change makers are looking at and focusing on, but that's not the majority of where everyone's at. And so, yeah, if you're listening now, even just having a look and maybe doing even just a bit of a assessment of where you're at with your technology, that could be a really good place to start. And yeah, I've worked in pharmacies where they're still using Windows 7 and yeah, there's just yeah, like you said, the tech's so old that it's probably was there before I was even born. So
yeah,
and that's okay, but it's probably not ideal or best practice.
yeah. I'll tell you this, Christy. What I found is a lot of the times it's not just the pharmacy owner. A lot of the times a pharmacy has their all things IT champion. You know, I speak to a lot of pharmacy owners who've owned their pharmacies for a very long time. And when it came to rolling out, you know, MySL into our dispense software and trying to go through the whole process of getting that up and running and explaining to them what they need to do, they're like, don't talk to me. Go talk to this particular person. They're the ones that are running all our IT stuff. So I think there's always someone there that we can talk to, and there's always someone there that can be of help. And if there's no one with you in the pharmacy and there's no one there that can help you, at the end of the day, give your vendor a call. If you give your dispensing vendor a call, ask them for help. If you need to, that's why you pay licensing at the end of the day. You know, like, we're there to help, and they're there to give them the guidance. So I think that's really important as well. Ask colleagues. That's always really good. I'm sure there's someone there.
Absolutely. I think this is a great time to wrap up. It's been a great session chatting to you today. I've definitely learned a lot. And my final question for you is, if you were to give your younger self some advice, what would you give to yourself?
I know you told me this earlier and I was trying to think about it the whole time.
Even something not even related to the conversation.
Honestly, it's don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to get out of the comfort zone, and don't be afraid to switch lanes for a second. From a career perspective, I think that's really important. As a young pharmacist, I think one of the things that I would really tell to my young self is the knowledge that you have is really highly regarded in health in general. You feel like, you know, because you're a young pharmacist, you've got thousands of other pharmacists around you, that you're like, everyone knows more than me. But the moment you take that little bit of a sidestep out just to see what the rest of the world looks like and understand where pharmacy sits in the rest of the world, when I say the rest of the world, I mean the rest of the health sort of sphere and the health sort of industry, just recognize that the knowledge that you have is valuable and not to downplay it. I think that's really, really important.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I definitely think that's something to take on board. And when you mentioned too about don't be afraid to sidestep as well, and try new roles and take that step to reach out or apply for something that might seem a little bit left field. And I'm sure there might be people that might say to you, why are you doing that? It doesn't make sense. And you should do this or do that. But yeah, don't be afraid and give it a go. You never know where life's going to take you.
Yeah, I think you and I are both very good examples of that.
Absolutely. Who knows where we'll be in another 2 to 5 years?
Who knows?
Who knows? Well, thank you so much, Mina, for the chat today. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope that you'll be able to join us on the show again and let us know what your next step in the pharmacy career journey for you. So yeah, thank you again for sharing your journey and insights with us. And yeah, it's definitely clear that pharmacy and digital health holds incredible potential for the future. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Chrissy Lee. Thanks.
Be very happy to, just say the word.
You've been listening to Your Pharmacy Career podcast, brought to you by Ravens Recruitment. Don't miss our next episode, where we continue to explore the multifaceted world of pharmacy careers. Make sure to subscribe and share.